okay, this isn't going to be terribly amazing like Hassan probably just showed you, but we were thinking of little things to talk about, and if you'd probably noticed in the trailer, there's a lot of curves going on in our teaser. So I like curves, they're lots of fun, and not enough people use them, and there are lots of nifty little tricks that some of you probably already know. Sorry? Oh, right. How's that? Will you actually see things there? We'll try it, bear with me. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, so as I was saying, not a lot of people use curves. Some of these little tricks you may know, some of them they're not tricks at all, but I just thought I'd talk about it since it's lots of fun. Anyway, curves. There's the two types of curves. I usually only use the Bezier curves because they're much easier to control than the NURBS ones. You can play with them, very simple, just extrude bits and control click to add new points. There are different handle types, like if you keep pressing H, I forget what the names are, but some don't let you rotate and some scale automatically and some do other things. I just remember by the colours, and the purple ones are the ones I like the most. That's the cool one then. So probably the most interesting thing about curves is when you can bevel them and turn them into 3D objects. Because like this, they're just, I'll add a new curve to show you. When you first add a curve, it's 2D and it's just for shapes and things. It's nice for logos, whatever. If I move it around in 3D space, it doesn't do anything. So click 3D and it makes it 3D. So you can see the direction of the curve by the little lines that are going, crossing it perpendicular. And another interesting thing is that when it's 3D, you can see, because of these lines, each point also has another value called the tilt value. And you can change that by pressing T instead of R to rotate or something. And if you press T, you can see down the bottom it says tilt, and you can go around and it changes the tilt of the curve. And you think, what could that be useful for? But it works nicely when you've got things following the curve and you want it to go around in a certain way. But there's so much more than that. Anyway, beveling. Over here, there's a little field called BevOb, and what you can do is get another curve, and if you put the name of that object in there, it will extrude that shape along the length of the curve. So here I've got this little circle called BevCircle. I can just type in, say, over here, BevCircle, and bing, I've got this circle extruded along the length of the curve. And now in CVS, Ton has fixed it so that it all updates in real time and you can see how it moves and adjusts all the handles, and you've got this geometry. You can see right now it's a bit jumpy going around there, a bit blocky, and you can change the resolution just like that. So that's lots of fun. No, these are just bevels. It's the bevel object in the curve, which is going along the length of it like that. Now, that's using a circle, and you can see if you zoom in there, that's the profile that's been extruded around. Say I change it to this bev square object. It's a square. If it's solid, you can probably see it a bit better. And so you can do all sorts of things, like if I take my bev square over here and start messing with it, you can see how it all updates over here, and you can get some interesting shaped things. Another cool thing is using the tilt option, because one thing which I've done before, I've taken this circle, I won't duplicate it at all, that's silly. Subdividers, and grab a few points around here, scale it in to get a sort of cloverleaf kind of profile. That's really ugly, but bear with me. And so if I make that the bevel object, let's say this one, I get this funky little looking thing, but then I can use my T key, the twist, and turn it into a rope and twist it around. And then you can just pull it wherever. It's a bit wacky there because I haven't got all of the things twisted at the same amount. Then you've got this nice interactive rope thing that you can shape however you like, and you don't have to worry about meshes getting all the points in order, and when you transform it goes all crazy. And this is all nice, non-destructive, and very, very flexible, which is, I probably should have mentioned also, the great thing about just using a circle as the bevel object, because if you try to do that with a mesh, like an extruded out cylinder type thing, you rotate it and then that makes the curve. I'll just demonstrate it, it's much easier. If you add a cylinder and say cut it a few times, about that way. Oops, that's not what I want at all. That's better. Damn that Q key. If you try to do things like rotate it around, then you can see it sort of pinches in a bit smaller here. The more you do it, the more crazy it gets. And it takes a lot of tweaking to get these sorts of things right if you want to make nice curvy things, which is what the curves are for, so use them. The next thing that I'd like to show you are taper curves, which is a relatively new feature. Bevel objects have been around for ages and ages and ages, but tapering is kind of new. I'll get a new curve up first just to show you, and this workflow of I think Bassam was talking about yesterday, having to get the name of the thing, and you can copy it and then paste it into here. It's a really slow process. It's not even working. So I'll just type it in. That's how annoying it is. So here's my curve, and it's got a bevel, and I can fiddle with it. Now the second thing that's underneath the bevel object is the taper object, and where the bevel is defining the cross section, the taper is defining how it sort of tapers off along the length of the curve. And over here I've got some little pre-made ones, and this has got the axes on so you can see what it looks like. But basically it takes the height of the curve away from the y-axis. That defines the width of the curve as it goes along. So say I take this one here, whatever its name is, just taper, and I stick it as the taper object of this. You can't see much there, but it's got the slight curve. If I take this and do that, it tapers along the edge. And of course you can do all sorts of crazy things and make it bumpy and funny shapes, whatever. Again, it's low resolution, so I'll just, that's a bit much. Yeah, that's a bit better. And so that's a taper curve. Again, still interactive and still fun to play with, and subdivide and sculpt it around as much as you like. Sorry? Sorry, I didn't understand. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yes, it does. What was I going to say? Yeah, the distance from the center of, like, the radius, whatever, the center of the curve to the edge is defined by the distance from the y-axis. Well, it's just along the y-axis from the center point in the tapering one. So I can just, even if I just move it along the y-axis or move it back down, it can change shape. Another cool thing is, which I do a lot, a new curve. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. What's that book? Here's that again. If you notice, if you've used the Bev curves before, you notice that the ends are hollow, which can be a real pain. So what I sometimes do to cap the ends, let's pump up the resolution, I just give it a taper curve like this one, which just has a little bits at the bottom and the other side. And low resolution. So there's the curve with the sealed ends. I can go and tweak that over here. You get the idea. But that's how you can cap the ends of the curves nicely. But there's more. Since the taper curve is just giving it volume along the length of the curve, it can be really fun if you animate it with RVKs or shapes now. So what I've got here is a taper curve, and I have given it two keys. One is this, and one is this. And I have this IPO that's going between them, so on and so forth. So if you look over here, you can, as I slide the time slider along, it's sort of moving along the curve. Down the bottom you can see I've done the same thing, but I've just stretched it out. So that's, you can get that nice sort of pen writing on effect, or the funky motion graphics things flying through the air and rainbows going over, and it's so easy to do just with these taper curves and RVKs. And a practical example of this is in the workshop here for the Orange project. We're messing around making like a film leader intro, and so I made that with animated taper curves. All that is, it's just, this is just a big circular curve. This one over here is the animated taper curve, and it's just going around and around and around and around and around. So it's all in 3D and it's all so nice. And that's that. Okay, what next? Curve to form. Curve to form is lots of fun. This is also a relatively new feature. If you need 4 versions or something, you can get an object, and you can get a curve, and you do parent, curve deform, and now that curve, this is going to be crazy, it was rotated wrongly, I think. Now the curve deforms the object, and it's kind of like a lattice, but it's just working along the length of this curve, and you can do all sorts of things like that with it. And that's cool, I like that, but I'll find it more fun if I don't actually put it on the curve and deform. By the way, that's the old way of doing it, if you do parent and do curve deform, but now we have the modifier stack. If you just do Control P to add the curve deform, it puts it in this curve parent deform like it does for the old armatures and whatever. If you do make real, then you've got a bunch of extra options about whether you want it to display the results in the 3D view or in the render or in edit mode and all of that kind of crazy stuff. And it also means that you can have multiple curves and then deforming it, and you can have a curve and an armature and a lattice and all sorts of things happening at the same time, and it's much, much, much more powerful. But now I've got this, actually I better move it so it's over near the curve. I've got this being deformed by the curve, and don't ask me why it's the y-axis, but if you grab this thing and move it in the y-axis, it travels along the length of the curve. Now, when it's the end of the curve, it just follows the tangents. Ah, that's right. But yeah, anyway, it's doing this, and say you can make the curve cyclic if you press C, and now the monkey just goes all the way around the curve as long as you like. I did some interesting things with this, make this graffiti style music video, and just arrows going all over the place just along the curves. Where am I? Ah, yes. Okay, just one more little thing. Oh, no. 2 more little things. Actually, I don't even have a camera here, but where am I? Okay. Subdivide it a bit. I just need a weird shaped curve so I can show you what I'm talking about here. Okay. Texturing curves can be kind of tricky sometimes, but there's one little button which will save your life. I'll just give it a material here and give it a texture, and this one is, well, maybe it's not so good. Okay. A magic texture. Yeah! Oh well. I'll have the emit so we can see it, and there's our magic texture. Now what happens with this is that it's using the normal texture space just like the texture space of an object. You can display it in the view if you click this text space. That dotted blue, I'll see a better outside camera view. This dotted blue box defines the texture space, and of course just like any other objects you can press T and you can move the texture space around and size it and whatever. And it should be updating, I don't know why it's not. But anyway, if I render this, you should see something pretty tracing. While I'm at it, I'd better get rid of this horrible blue background. That's right. So there's my nice magic text. Oh, what? That's not doing what I want it to. It looks completely different. Interesting. But anyway, actually I can probably describe it better with a different one. Bear with me. It's all going to be alright. Okay, that's better. So I've put a blend texture on there, and because it's just using that cube texture space, it maps the texture using the Orco coordinates, like the original texture space, whatever it is. This one here, Orco, is just mapping it straight along texture space. But that's ugly because if my curve changes, like to go down here, it's kind of distorted in a way, in that the texture isn't sticking to the curve. But I can demonstrate it even better if I make it loop around. Yeah, that's more like it. So it's just going left to right. But if you go back to the curve edit buttons, there's this thing called UV Orco, forces to use UV coordinates for texture mapping, Orco. So the curves have built-in UVs even though they don't have faces. But the UVs go along the length of the curve. So what this UV Orco button does, I don't know how it does it, but it somehow distorts the texture space so that it uses this UV information that's built in along the length of the curve. So if you click UV Orco, hopefully it starts at one end of the curve and it goes all the way down to the other. So instead of that texture space being mapped left to right along this imaginary cube, it's going from one end of the curve to the other. And that is a pretty similar technique to how Andy was doing those hair tests on the orange block. It would start one color or one opacity, it would start fully opaque at one end. And using the UV Orco, as the curve went out there, it would get more and more transparent. So that can be really useful if you're doing things like the bumpy kind of tubes, like in a vacuum cleaner, how it's all bumpy along the edge. It's ribbed, so you can get just the repeating sideways texture and map it to UV Orco, and you've got this nice textured curve. Last thing. This is something I was kind of talking about with Martin Thief Poiret the other day, and yesterday. And I'd always had a big annoyance with the follow path constraint. I guess I can just quickly demo it to you if I had the path and add this and whatever, and give this a constraint. Of course. Path constraints. The follow path constraints constrains an object to travel along a path. But the thing is, it animates it automatically, and you can control it with like a speed curve and stuff like that, but it's really tricky and it's really annoying. And I'd always wanted to be able to just have some path constraint which would just stick the object to the path. Then I could just move it here and then key it, and then move it further up the path and key it when I want it to. And so it would just animate, just like animating everything else without having to mess with constraints and things like that. And yesterday we figured out a kind of solution. If you get curve, make it a bit more interesting. And we can use the curve to form with just a simple plane. And that's kind of crazy because I haven't moved it into the right spot or whatever. So now I have this plane that's curve deformed, and I can move the plane along the curve just by moving it in the y-axis or whatever you've got it set to. It's going a bit funky at the bottom, but that's just because I'm doing this really roughly. But then all it takes is to get a monkey, the Weisel gradient, and vertex parent that monkey to the face. If you do it to the face, it will inherit all the orientation information and size information as well. But if you just do it to the vertex, it will just move, just taking the location. So now I've got my monkey, and of course this needs to be tweaked, as everything usually does. But now I can get the plane that these vertex parented to, insert a key, move it forward, and say I want him to be along here, insert a key, and now he just animates along that path with the keyframes that I set, and I can get it and get the keyframes and move them in time and all of that kind of stuff, and it's so much nicer than the follow path. Really nice for getting things following along. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. The plane I just put on a hidden layer. It's just to stick the monkey to. Yeah. Yeah. It all gets messed up. That's an interesting point. I think it does. Oh, no, it doesn't. Yes, that is cool. That's the way. And this is just one last silly little, what was that, abusive thing that Martin was talking about in using this for, is you can use this technique to solve the old tank tracks problem. So I've just modeled a whole bunch of these tank things and done the parented to planes and just Alt-D duplicated them along the length of this curve. And I'll hide that layer so you can... Oh, no, it won't. Now I'll hide it. And all of the planes that these tank tracks are stuck to are parented to this empty. And I should also mention too that this is really only possible in a convenient way now we have the modifier stack, because I haven't actually parented these little guys to the curve. I've used the curve, oh, not these little guys, these little guys. I've used the curve modifier, so I don't get all sorts of crazy parenting relationships going on. But now, since they're, all of the planes are parented to this empty, I can just move it up and down, or no. Oh, that looks like I've got an IPO on it or something stupid like. Yeah, I was experimenting with driven keys, but I didn't get it to finish. If I move this up and down, all the tank tracks will rotate around just like that. And what I was trying to do over here, which I didn't get time to finish, was to use the new driven keys to connect the Z value of this to like the X and Y value of the tank that would be in here. So then all you need to do is just move the tank along and the tracks just continue at exactly the right rate to match the ground, and it's all very nice. But I didn't get that far. That can be an exercise for the viewer. But I think there's more to curves, but I think I'm out of time, so that's it.